But even
And
Jesus
when it says
didn't.
like nothing that
Oh, sorry. Go
when
ahead,
it
Matt.
when it says that nothing that goes into you defiles you, that's a parable. He's not making it so it's okay to literally put anything in your mouth, because even his own apostles in Acts 15 say that we can't eat blood or food sacrificed to idols. So it's not a general rule of thumb with no exceptions. Okay, he's just saying like it doesn't matter if you wash your hands or not. Your stomach's going to purge the dirt from your unwashed hands. It's not saying we can eat things that God calls an abomination.
But my question is that we because you just mentioned Acts 15 and where it doesn't say that holding the Jewish law would be salvific, and that includes the dietary law. So I guess I failed to see how, while I agree that yes, bottom feeders,
Was Noah
swine
Jewish?
are unclean. What? Excuse me?
Was Noah Jewish?
Yes, he
Noah
would be
was Jewish? Well, no, he couldn't have been because he was before Abraham.
he would be following God's precepts still at that point. I mean, he would not be
But
Jewish in the
Jewish
name of the word, but yes, he
Jewish
would
only
be a
means from
Jew.
the tribe of Judah. Like Israel had 12 sons, and not even all the Israelites are Jewish. In fact, most of
So,
them aren't. Most of them are scattered into the Gentiles right now.
well, even Abraham was
Jewish just means from the tribe of Judah. So no, Noah
Abraham was a
definitely wasn't
Jew.
Jewish.
Abraham was Jewish. He
No, no,
circumcised
no, no, no.
himself to
Abraham
for the
was a
covenant.
Hebrew.
No,
A
Abraham
Hebrew.
was the first
That's
Jew.
different than Jew.
What I guess I so the distinction is that one is from the tribe of Judah and one is not.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because you can't have a Jew before the tribe of Judah even exists. So it's
Okay.
important because when people say, "Oh, that's Jewish law," well, no, it's not Jewish law. It was law given to all 12 tribes of Israel and believers in the Messiah. It's just that they're grafted into the Commonwealth of Israel. So you might have that understanding confused if you think that Jews are only the only ones that have to like obey the dietary laws, or the only ones that have to keep the Sabbath day. And the Sabbath is again one of the Ten Commandments. So like, there's especially no reason that you should say that's Jewish law.
So, are you Jewish?
No,
Okay,
I
so
I believe the Old and New Testament, and physically, no, not that that matters, but now
okay.
that so believers in the Messiah, and this is Romans 11, Ephesians 2, they're grafted into the Commonwealth of Israel, so they're no longer Gentiles when you're in the
Yeah,
Messiah.
honey.
Like it doesn't matter what your flesh is; it matters what your spirit is. Spiritual Israelites, they keep the covenants of promise. They believe in Yeshua the Messiah. So that's why you still need to keep the Sabbath day, the dietary laws. You can't do any idolatry. You can't live like a Gentile, which that Greek word ethnos literally means heathen. So if you're still calling yourself a Gentile, you're calling yourself a heathen. And really, you're acting like it too if you're
So
doing idolatry like Christmas.
then, can you reconcile Acts 15:29 then,
Yeah.
where he says that basically the only thing that the Gentiles need to abstain from is food sacrificed to idols, blood, what's been strangled, and from sexual immorality.
Yep,
If
and
you
that's
keep
echoed
That's the
in
yourself
only
from
stuff
these,
from.
you
that's
will
also
do
echoed in
where?
Acts
Well,
21:25.
right. It's
Yeah.
said multiple times, which means that obviously, if you're not of the Jewish faith, you're obviously a Gentile. And because you're a Gentile convert, these are what you're held to. We are not held to the rest of the restrictions that the Jews are held to.
Do we need to keep the Ten Commandments?
Well, obviously, those are what's told by Jesus to follow. The two commandments that he gives us: love the Lord with all your heart, and love your neighbors if you love yourself.
So we do need to keep the Ten Commandments.
We do. And we
Yeah,
do
Good.
keep them.
That's correct.
right.
Because the Ten Commandments are not the same thing as the law of Moses. And that's what the Acts 15 discussion was about, the law of Moses. But the law of Moses was given after God spoke the Ten Commandments verbally at Horeb. It says in Deuteronomy 5, verse 22, he added no more to the 10, and that was the end of the 10 words of the covenant. It wasn't until they transgressed with the golden calf, they broke the Ten Commandments, that Moses went up the second time and got the written Torah. That's why it's called the law of Moses. He wrote it. It's not the same. The Ten Commandments and the Torah, they're two completely separate covenants. Of course, the Torah repeats the Ten Commandments, but it existed before them. It's the same thing with the dietary laws. Back in Genesis 7, verse 2, it says that Noah, God taught him the difference between clean and unclean animals. So this standard existed way before there was ever a Jew, way before there was even a Hebrew. So this is something that was given to, well, Noah, a Gentile. And another really big point, and this is something that I tried to explain to Hammer of Heretics, but I don't think he really understood it, but In Isaiah chapter 66, verses 15 to 17, it's prophecy about the last days, the Lord's return, and it says he's going to slay those eating swine's flesh. So, if prophecy is true, which of course it is, why does prophecy say that the Messiah is going to slay people for breaking the dietary laws if they're abolished? It
Well,
doesn't make any
I
sense.
believe
It would
that
be a
because,
contradiction.
well, one, look at the context in which it was written. You've got prophecy it's delivered to the Jews, and of course this is given to people
Israel.
that had, yes, it was given to people that had those dietary restrictions in place. It's basically saying that those who do not follow the law, that do not obey God, are going to be slaughtered. Clearly, with regard to dispensation of the book, or in which it was written to, and the audience that it was written to, that has changed. It now incorporates the Gentiles, and we're not held to those same standards.
So is the prophecy wrong?
It's not wrong,
So
but
what's going to happen?
but look who it was written to at the time.
Context is
Yeah,
key
Israel,
with
us.
prophecy. Well, no, not us, Israel. The old covenant Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Correct.
but
Those
it's
are different.
prophecy of the future. It hasn't been fulfilled yet. Like, never in history has the Lord returned and executed his fiery judgment on the entire earth. Neither has all flesh began keeping the Sabbath day, as that same chapter also prophesies, which also shows that Sabbath isn't just for Jewish people, and that everybody's still going to be keeping it in the future kingdom. You should read that chapter for yourself. Isaiah 66, verses 15 to 17. The Lord slays pork eaters at his return. And
Right,
verses
but
23 to
but
24, all
he's
flesh will come to worship before him on the Sabbath day.
right, and he's likening pork eaters to people that are law breakers.
Okay, it's not just a metaphor. It's actual prophecy. It's
I'm
the
aware,
same
but
thing in chapter
right, but he's not
65 as well.
speaking of just pork. He's speaking of people that are disobeying the law
Yeah, they're
in
doing
general.
idolatry too.
Right.
I know. I'm not saying it's just for eating swine's flesh, but the fact that it's specifically mentioned shows that it's part of the issue. The other
Right,
issue is that they're doing idolatry.
He's
The Christians are still doing it.
He's addressing
He's
non-believers
addressing a
in
Jewish
that.
audience. Yeah.
They're
Correct.
not unbelievers.
Well, no, he meant he's addressing a Jewish audience. It was meant
Right.
for the Old
Speaking of
Testament of Israel.
non-believers.
Yeah, the Old Testament Israel, not the new fulfilled Israel.
So what's the point of that prophecy then? He's going to tell them that they're going to be slain at the second coming of the Messiah just for it to not happen anymore? It's, oh no, that's only
No,
for an Old
he's
Testament
saying
audience? Like, what does that even mean?
no. He's
It
definitely
sounds like he's trying
saying
to find a loophole out of this.
absolutely not.
No,
He's
not a
saying
loophole.
that by way of disobeying God, that the unbelievers will be punished.
Okay, and unbelievers are people who disobey God's commandments. Like,
Correct.
don't eat swine's
And
flesh. Like, don't put
but
up graven images.
the Gentiles are never given that.
Noah was.
Well,
And that's a rule given to the whole world because he was the only person at that time,
yeah,
besides him and his family.
prior to the new covenant.
Well, the new covenant doesn't happen until we all know the Lord and we're no longer teaching each other to know the Lord. That's what it says. He says he's going to drink the cup when he returns, when we meet him with him in his Father's kingdom, when the kingdom of God comes. That's when he drinks the cup of the New Testament. It's at the end of Revelation with the wedding feast. That's why there is a wedding feast. It's the consummation of the new covenant.
I beg to differ. The new covenant is clearly discussed in Jeremiah 31, verse 29. When
What does verse 34 say?
well, we can get to that, but when basically the son will no longer taste sour grapes because of the sins of his father.
Well, we're experiencing
That
that right now.
how so?
Because all the blood of the prophets is going to come onto the last days generation. So we still are being punished unless you repent.
I disagree with that.
Well, either way, look at verse 34. It says, we will no longer teach each other to know the Lord, for all shall know me, from the least to the greatest. That's talking about the new
Let me pull
kingdom
it up. Give me
when
1
everybody's
second.
going to know who God is.
You said verse 34.
Yep. What we're in right now is the refreshing of the covenant at Horeb, but we still have to keep the Ten Commandments.
We do keep the Ten Commandments.
Well, yeah, you say that, but then you have graven images in the churches, and I've already
No,
gone through that in circles with
so
you.
Matthew, I clarified with you the difference between objects that are meant and ordered for worship and objects that are not. God actually provided that distinction for us in the Old Testament.
So do you see verse 34?
Well, I'm reading the whole thing.
Okay.
Pardon me, but here's my question. So, we know that God told us to do the cherub, and you said that's okay because God commanded it, yeah?
Correct.
So, thing is, that means by default, having those images of heavenly creatures is bad. Anything that contradicts God is inherently evil, so why would God order us to do something evil, like make images of that which is in heaven?
Why did he command us to commit murder when he had Israel go take the promised land? If he commands something, it's righteous. Because it's righteous judgment on, well, a nation that did a bunch of wickedness and that stole the inheritance from Shem, if you actually look at books like Jubilees, which were removed from the canon, but I guess that's a different thing.
But God doesn't contradict
Point is,
himself, right?
God can command something, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you can do it later out of your own idea. That's called self-righteousness.
But why would God contradict himself?
He didn't. If he
Well-
wants to be worshipped using certain objects that he commands, but then he doesn't want that later, that's not a contradiction.
So-
That's just telling us what he wants him to do at certain times.
So I think
He didn't want the temple when Israel was being punished. We're in punishment right now. We're in exile, which is why we're not in the promised land right now.
So I think we talked
Because
about this.
Abraham's seed inherits the land of Canaan.
So
That's us.
we talked about
If
this
you
earlier,
believe.
though, Matthew, that those statues and the crosses are not ordered for worship and not meant to be worshipped. So just and again, just like the
And bowing
cherub,
down is worth it.
well, just like the cherubs and just like the bronze serpent, they were not also ordered for worship. And when the minute that the bronze serpent became an object for worship, it was destroyed.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the point is that none of the statues that you claim are idols are actually idols.
Well, you gave the definition of what an idol is, actually, when you quoted Psalm 115.
Yes.
Yeah, they are idols by definition.
No, they're not idols
That's how
because we don't
Scripture
think they're
defines them.
gods. No, that's not the case. And I've told you already that we don't look at these images or signs or icons as God. That God's not stuck in a painting or stuck in a statue. We don't, there's no inherent divinity to these depictions. We don't think that God is in there. We're not worshiping them by showing respect. I think the mistake here is that you're presuming that they are and presupposing that they are idols, and they're not.
Well, apparently you think that some people do think that, because you have to have an answer to somewhere of Deuteronomy 4, Deuteronomy 32, Revelation,
Well,
all the prophecy, or really even just all the prophets
to be
talk
fair,
about this. It's like the number one thing they speak against.
To be fair, though, the Romans thought that early Christians were cannibals. Does just because they think that based on an outside perception that means it's true? I think that the burden of proof isn't very strong.
The prophets say there's going to be idolatry. There's going to be idolatry in the end days church.
Okay, we already
the prophets
explained
are not
this.
liars. That's what you got to understand.
No, I understand.
I
understand, Matthew. I think I already told you this, but I did say that there are some people that do engage in idolatry of those images and icons and statues by mistake, but they're not. That's not taught by the church, and that's not held by the church either. So yeah, we acknowledge that. Yeah, sure, there's idolatry going on, but at the same time, that's not what they were made for. That's not what they're supposed to do. And again, just saying that because you're Catholic, ipso facto, you are an idolater is uncharitable, and frankly, it's false witness.
But it's not just that idolatry. It's also Christmas. Well, it's also Easter, Halloween.
Christmas, idolatry. That's Christmas, Easter, and Halloween are not idolatry. We talked about Christmas already. We talked about Easter as well. Regarding Halloween, I fail to see what's idolatrous about Halloween. I fail to see what's idolatrous about either of these holidays, actually. Any of
Ancient witchcraft from Ireland.
What?
Baal worship, even.
Okay, how old
you know who
do you think...
Beltane is, right?
How old do you think the practice of Hallowtide is?
Hallowtide? Is that what they called it?
Yes. Hallowtide. It's a 3-day holiday.
Well, there's been druids in that location in Britain since, well, Paul's time. Even Paul went to meet them,
It didn't come from
and he
Ireland.
noticed how that they were descended from the tribe of Judah. But they were
Well,
still doing all their practices. That's
it-
in Acts 29, which again they removed.
it did not come from Halloween. That is not where Halloween came from. Rather, it came from France or Germany. It was in Europe, not in or mainland Europe, not in Ireland or England.
Halloween's from Samhain.
No,
And they would
it's
do
not.
firstborn sacrifices on that time too.
So again, we've talked about
which
this.
is one of the things warned against in Deuteronomy 12, which is why you don't add or take away from God's commandments. You're going to end up adopting some pagan custom.
So Matthew, we talked about this earlier, where this is a fallacious argument, a post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. It's an informal fallacy, and this is where you are. You left?
So
What
I
happened?
guess.
I was actually gonna give him an answer to